Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Solnar Swift Arc, and that is a tabletop role-playing game that I am writing, and I'm going to be talking about Swift Arc, which is the rules engine, and specifically today I'm going to talk about difficulty checks, dice pools, and so forth. So difficulty checks are the just kind of the lifeblood of any tabletop role-playing game. So it's the heart of the rules mechanic. It is how you achieve something. And the classic tabletop role-playing game action that you would think of is you have a human, they have a sword, they're going to attack another human who has a sword, and how does that get resolved? Okay, because one, when you're in combat, that's going to be contested, right? So it isn't an automatic action that will just happen, right? So there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into this, and so right now what I have decided is one of the things where I'm at is I've decided what I want to use and what I don't want to use, but this is definitely something where I'm in the middle of it, and I'm still kind of working my way through it, just getting to the end goal of this and actually determining what will actually happen in this. So here's what I would talk. Here's what I've decided. One, there are a lot of tabletop role-playing games out there, right? And so I don't want to just bring another, a D20 clone or even a Dungeons and Dragons clone to the market. I want it to be really new and fresh and have some innovation in it. I want that innovation to be elegant, and I want the rules mechanics to move quickly. I want the story. Number one goal of Swift Arc is the story moves quickly. All right, that is absolutely preeminent above all other concerns, is that these stories are told quickly, right? So with that said, here's my thought, right? One, right out of the gate, one of the most different things about Solnar Swift Arc, about Swift Arc overall, is going to be the dice. So there are 6 sets of dice in Solnar Swift Arc. Anyone can bring them to the table. One player can bring them to the table. The game master can bring them to the table. But one of the things is really there are 6 exact sets of dice, and they are the absolute pure set of polyhedrals: D4, D10, D8, D12, D20. And then you have the D10 0, 1, 2, 3, and you have the D10 that is 0, 0, like the 10, 20, 30, 40. And then you have the D20 itself. You have what you would buy that comes in a cylinder at any tabletop role-playing game set, any tabletop role-playing game store or store that sells tabletop role-playing game supplies. So you're going to have that traditional set and the full set. There are going to be 6 full sets of that. So you're actually, if it's D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20, and then the D10 again, the D00. Sorry for the noise there. D00, that's 7 dice. And 7 times 6, you're talking 42 dice. So you need 42 dice to play this. The first 5 sets are going to be opaque in specific colors. First full set is red. Second full set, and that red set, that specifically aligns with the attribute of agility. All right, second full set is green, and that it is opaque green. Period. Right, the simplest green you can get, pure base primary color green. Right, and easily identifiable as a green die. Each one in that set is easily identifiable as a green die. So you have that, right? And then and that green set aligns to the attribute vigor. Okay. Next, you have white. All right, so it's going to be a white die set. With all those, D4, D10, D8, all the way up, right? And that entire die set is going to be 100%. That aligns to the mental attribute intellect. Right? If you notice the first 2 I said those are physical attributes. Vigor and agility are physical attributes. There are actually 5 attributes in this game, and they all align to a color. So you have white aligning to intellect. The black will align to presence. Okay? So the black dice align to presence, and so that's going to be your charisma. But I feel like presence really kind of captures, a charmer and an intimidator, or even a Paul Giamatti type, Charisma is challenging to pin down, but I think this is a good, good way of capturing that and actually containing it, right? The last one, blue, the blue set is going to be edge. And edge is really open and it can be used in a lot of ways. So those are the 5 attributes that belong to the players. Vigor, agility, intellect, presence, and edge. Okay, and then the last dice. What is that 6 dice set? The 6 dice set is a special dice set that, in my mind right now, belongs to the Game Master. Although the Game Master will never touch dice. So that is one thing I'm going to use in this game. Game Master never rolls dice. This does a lot of things. 1, it frees the Game Master to focus on the game. 2, absolutely zero fudging in this game. There is every single die roll in Solnar Swift Arc is honored. There are no secret rolls. There are no rolls that are not seen by the entire table. If the Game Master makes if someone makes a roll and that kills your character, or if you make a roll and that kills your character, that stands. Like, every roll matters. There is never a point where any dice are fudged within Swift Arc. I've always been against fudging, and so I'm building it right into the system. All right, so with that said, the 6th one is a unique die set. And here, players, so at this point, to supply the dice, you had to go get opaque dice that are red, white, blue, black, and green, right? But this last one can be it all has to be the same color, but it can be swirled, it can be clear, it can be sparkles, it can be pink, it can be anything, as long as it's not opaque and one of the other colors, right? So it's a unique set. And here's the other thing. So when you're playing this tabletop role-playing game, all the dice are in the center of the table, and they remain there. And then when you go to make a roll, you start with nothing. You don't start with any dice, right? So this is one of the ideas I have is you getting a die to roll is a privilege. It's not built in the way it always is. So, if you go to swing your sword, if you are a base character and you really don't know your race or your class or any of the things, you don't have any dice. So 1, your race is going to supply a dice. Your class is going to supply a dice. Maybe one of the circumstances is going to supply a die, right? And you will pull them from the pool, right? Now, if you pull a red D12, right, from the pool, and you're making, and this, so actually, let's do green, right? So you're swinging a sword. That's going to come off of vigor. So if you grab a black D12, you roll that and you get an 8, you have an 8, okay? If you grab a green D12 and you roll a 12, it will explode because you're using the die that aligns with the color. So if you're using a die type, a die color that aligns with the type of roll you're making, a vigor roll, then you'll get something special that'll happen on the die. It might explode on the top, on the high, it might explode on the low, it might explode on the 12 and on the 1 on a D12, right? Depending on your circumstance. And then and then the other issue is, so essentially there's a die economy. And so when, at all times, players will have dice in, at different times during the game, players will have dice in front of them because they've gotten those dice through planning or through gaining a particular advantage or a particular advantage, right? What I haven't worked out is how do I deal with disadvantages, right? So one of the things is here's another thing that I want to make sure. The other issue. So if it seems like I'm a little unclear on this is definitely one of these things that's still kind of percolating in my mind, trying to get to the end goal of this, the end specifics of this system. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is I want to do a situation where what exactly? Oh yeah. So one of the things I want to get rid of is I've seen this in virtually every single game I've ever played, and I'd want to kill it. I think it's it's gone. It needs to be gone. No more +2s, no more +4s. Right? It's lame. Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition was filled with it. Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition had Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition really had this problem where like you get a +2 if you're in a forest and it's raining, and everybody's like, oh, and it was the worst because you had to remember it, right? And then when you made your roll, a lot of times you had to explain your roll. Say, I'm getting +2 from this, I'm getting +4 from this. And they were often very circumstantial, right? So one, you'll definitely be building a die pool to make your roll. One of the things I was thinking is certain players through their classes will be able to manipulate that dice economy, like leadership. Clearly, you know, a leader would be able to take a D12 or a D4 in their hand and move it over to somebody, and that would reflect them saying, "Hey, you got somebody coming up on your right," you know, and that would be leadership, right? So this is going to be challenging. I basically, if you get an advantage or if you get something that makes it easier for you to hit, I want that to give you one of three things. I want it to give you a new die, an additional die. So if you have a D4 and you're trying to swing your sword, and the person is on slippery ground and you're coming from above, right? Then, or let's just say that that you have the high ground. That's the simplest way. I would say, okay, since you have a D4, you get to grab another die from the pool, right? Or right, let's say rather than getting an additional die from the pool at the center of the table, maybe you say, hey, I want to take this black die and change it to a green die, and that, you know, so then you get a green D4. So you could get an additional die, or you could get a die that changes the color of your current die, or you could get a step, right? So you currently have a D4. You could get an additional D4. Or, then you'd have 2d4 to make your roll. Or you could say, I want the green die, and now that's going to make my, you know, it's going to explode on the top at a 4. Maybe it'll explode on a 1 on the bottom, you know, and which means you get to re-roll and add and keep going. If you roll another 4, you could, you know, you get 4, 4, and 3. That's going to be an 11, right? Out of 1d4, right? But that would only happen if you were using a green vigor die, right? So you have this issue of, hey, I have my die, I have my color of my die, I can get an additional die, or I can step that die up. So I push my D4 back into the pool and I take a D6. And so now I need to put boundaries around that. What is allowed? When is it allowed? Which characters is it allowed for? Which races is it allowed for? So forth, right? What circumstances trigger these, right? And then what happens if you go for a die and you logically should be getting a red D6, but somebody else has that red D6, another player sitting in their pool, right? Does that mean you get the D8, which means that the dice economy would then work for the players, right? So I think this is the way to go. I'm excited about this because it gets rid of D4, gives rid of +2, +4. Those are just the worst. And honestly, I want to be respectful. I loved D&D. I love every single edition of Dungeons & Dragons. So when I say, I don't like this in Dungeons & Dragons, I realize that is the foundation that I am standing on, and I give proper respect to all the men and women who created those games. And so I just wanted to be clear that is, I definitely have proper respect for those specific things, So with that, I'm also thinking, what else am I thinking about? Okay, so that's where I'm heading with this dice pool item. I'm going to go on a little bit more, and I'm going to talk about what happens, levels, right? And also, let's keep talking about, one fighter swinging a sword. It's one of the most basic actions in tabletop role-playing games. You see it all the time. And so one of the ideas I have for this is levels. And so also speeding the game, right? So here's what happens, all right? So levels are very important. So let's say we have a level 10 fighter, and he is going to swing a sword at another level 10 at a level 10 monster, okay? Or let's say just a level 10 enemy, another humanoid, okay? If a level 10 fighter swings a sword at a level 10 enemy, okay, humanoid enemy, he has to make a roll. If a level 10 fighter makes a roll at a level 9, one level down, humanoid enemy, he does not make a roll. He can choose to wound that. He can choose to deliver a wound immediately to that level 9 humanoid enemy, because that person is one level below them. If that humanoid enemy is level 8, 2 below, he can slay him automatically, no roll. So one level below, wound. 2 level below, he can slay him outright. Level 7, humanoid enemy, he can group him So you can say, hey, you know, I know there's 6 of you humanoid enemies, and that are all level 7. I'm going to group 2 of you, right? And I'm going to wound 2 of you automatically without a roll. Okay. If it's level 6, he can group and he can slay 2, right? And then if it's level 5, they're all level 5s. Maybe, you know, because you know, as you increment down, maybe now he can group 3 of them, right? So one of the things is the only time you ever make a roll is when you're dealing with somebody at your level. Anybody who you're dealing with, any kind of type of enemy below your level, you just wound them or you slay them outright, right? You just say, I do that because that's the way I roll. No pun intended there. You wouldn't actually make the roll. Sorry. So I just kind of, you know, so that's another thing in there that I really kind of wanted to do, is just put in there how, you know, just another idea for how I want Swift Arc to massively accelerate the ability to tell these stories quickly. Thank you.